KA4KKF.
Hey, all right. Good evening. Wire antennas. He asked me to do something on wire antennas. Okay, if you can read that, great. I tried to make it big enough so the guys in the back. Can you read that back there? Looks okay. Okay. Um, that's over 100 on the font size. So okay. Just a few things. Wire antennas. Everybody thinks about them different. There's a lot of different things you can do with them. I have some examples of wire size up here, balance, uh, Dacron rope and stuff, different sizes. You can see about that, what you want to use. HOAs, wire size, the best to use is the small black size here. If you'll notice, this probably came off in-fed, my antenna, I believe that's the size of the wire they use. They do make it a little bit bigger wire size. And you can go to Home Depot and buy that 500-foot roll of this size, which is heavy wire compared to this type wire. So whatever you want to do, you can do that, whichever is cheaper. Question.
Is there a difference in what wattage the wire will support?
Yes. Yeah, he'll talk about that also. Also, the thickness of the wire, the gauge, the thicker, the wider the bandwidth. They talk about on different things. Okay. Um, this is an in-fed for 20 meters only. It is not a multi-band in-fed antenna. It's just 20 meters. After the programs, y'all can come up here and look at this stuff. There's an address on here, and you can go to the website and read more information on it. This is a one-to-one balun for 20-meter digital. That's what it was cut for. A few things. You can use different parts for making your antennas. You've seen the diagrams where they say the sine wave is equal top and bottom on a full wave dipole. Well, your balun will make that come out that way. If you connected, like this antenna, just has the coax going there, goes straight to one side and the other side, no balun or anything like that. Okay, you may get distortions in your wave coming off of it.
I can address this question, though, if you want, real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, a dipole, the center of a dipole is 75 ohms for a flat dipole. Now, of course, we use 50 ohm coax. Usually the mismatch is pretty small. You bend the legs down of that dipole, and you can make it a 50 ohm antenna. For an off-center fed dipole, the further you go out towards the end, the higher your impedance is. So you'll find some multiband off-center fed dipoles. They use either 4-to-1 balun or 6-to-1 balun, whether you grab the 200 ohm part or the 300 ohm part. Converted that down back to 50 ohms. That's the reason for using either 4-to-1 balun or 6-to-1 balun. As well, if you want to use ladder line, which is 300 ohm, 600 ohm, 450 ohm, I use a multiband antenna. I know we're not trying to get into multibands, but it makes it easier for your tuner to take that doublet, which is fed with, it's a dipole, but fed with ladder line. You can turn into a multiband antenna. I take that ladder line, which is 450 ohms, transform it through a 4-to-1 balun, so it's easier to tune for the tuner. It's closer to 50 ohms. Does that kind of make sense? Hold on, Mike. For the Zoom people.
So if you've got a dipole and you're feeding it in the center, you've got two wires going to it, the center core and the braid. So do you use a 1-to-1
Yes.
on each of those feeds?
No.
Go ahead.
The 1-to-1, it's taking that unbalanced coax and turning into balanced, because the dipole is balanced. Now that one antenna, the green antenna I showed you, it's taking the braid and putting the one leg and the center conductor going to the other leg, and they work, but you're going to have, as far as the pattern, it's not as uniform a pattern. When you take a balun and put it in there, now it has equal amounts of electrical energy going to each leg, so you have a more uniform donut-shaped pattern. to your antenna system. It's more predictable.
These are measurements you're using, this website. All this will be on the website if you want to go back and look at it. This here gives you a band and a length, tip to tip, center frequencies that they cut it for. And this one is showing a center insulator with no bowing. You can run it that way. If you want to get on the air, make this antenna with these dimensions, and you should be on the air. Right, Paul? All right. Yes, sir. No, that's coax. Oh, here's another chart with dimensions. Another chart with dimensions. Okay, these websites, the WA2000, his thoughts on antennas and putting them together, get on the air. A lot of practice that he's done. QSL.net, these guys wire antennas for ham radio. They're excellent. And then you've got ARL.org website. These are some I go to when I want to answer some questions and stuff. Okay. You can, yeah. If you use a search engine, I use DuckDuckGo. You can use Google. You can use Bing or whatever. Just put in there wire antennas for ham radio, and you'll come up with thousands of pages. People have different opinions on it. You ask 10 different hams, and you'll get 10 different answers on putting an antenna up. Oh, 20 different answers. That's right. Okay. Some of these dog bones, you'll see what they call them for the putting a rope on one side and the antenna on the other. If you're cheap like me, you can use PVC parts, drill holes in them so they won't cut the wire, and make end parts. You can take a cap, drill holes in it, and make a center conductor that connects the coax center outer shield and the inner shield, and you can weatherproof it with silicone stuff in there. I think this was a 40-meter dipole. Okay. What else did I miss? There's some more websites on calculators. You'll get a lot of different calculators out there for making simple wire antennas. If you want to get on the air, they don't have to be high. I'm running a dipole now. It's about 15 feet off the ground. Works okay. So not any problem there. Japan, Australia, that's running FT8, not voice, not CW, but the listening capabilities of that modem is a lot easier than my ear or hearing sideband or CW. But okay, question?
Yeah, I have a large fenced-in backyard. Could you mount one of the antennas along the rail of a fence that's
Wooden
probably,
fence?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. About 6-8 feet off the ground? Yeah. Yeah. You can put one there. See what it does. Question behind him there, Neil. If you're in HOAs, I saw something about somewhere up northeast, one of the states had disabled HOAs going against ham radio antennas. Did y'all see that on, I think it was on a Facebook post somewhere. Question, go ahead.
Yes. I ran dipoles with rope attached to both ends, and I've always had really bad luck breaking and etc. What I found that worked really well for me is running the line the entire way and then attaching the dipole to the rope directly, and I can use tape or whatever. And as far as I could tell, it's electrically invisible, so it shouldn't affect it.
Correct. Tie wraps.
Coil tape or
best little stuff they made. Tie wraps. You can take a PVC rope, a skinny one like this. Not PVC. The rope here,
550 cord?
dicron or nylon rope. Yeah, and run it from end to end, and then take tie wraps and tie wrap your antenna to it so it's not. The coax will pull it down in the middle if it's not supported in the middle. So if you're only supported on the sides, then run the rope, tie your antenna to the rope, and you should have a flat top antenna. Yeah, Dave. Behind.
If you have a tree or something in the middle, run a rope right to the center connector, and you could even go inverted V.
Oh, yeah.
And that way you get a little bit of vertical properties along with the horizontal properties in your antenna.
Yeah, depending on your real estate and how well you have to hide your antenna, you can go inverted V this way or this way. Who runs inverted V's in here? Okay, Neil, Ralph, Dave. Okay, excellent. Flat top dipoles. How many run dipoles? Okay, quite a few. Infeds. Yeah, a lot. That's a popular antenna. You'll see a lot of people talk, especially WA2000, talk about infeds and stuff. I'm not a physicist. I haven't really studied all of the stuff, mechanics for antennas and stuff like this guy went to school for, RF stuff, RF engineering. But if it works, it works. Put it up in the air and get on the air. Yes.
You mentioned earlier about, I think you said 12 to 16 gauge wire. Is there any benefit to a thicker gauge wire, or is that not anything that's, I mean, what would be any drawbacks of using a heavier gauge wire? The weight? Weight, heavier the wire, the weight, ice on it during the wintertime if we get ice or snow. Also the wind. When you put your antenna up, make sure you're not too tight between your trees or your supports. You want to have a little bit of give in it so when it sways in the wind, bandwidth, the thicker the wire, the greater the bandwidth on that. Yes, Dave. Over here. Go ahead with Jeff. You're right back there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you remember Eddie Faust's antenna called the Eddie?
Yes. That's a multi-band antenna which will be covered later. Multi-band antennas we'll cover later, okay?
Got another
question. Got another one back there.
Just in regards to NVIS.
Yeah.
Can you expound on NVIS antennas?
Yep.
He'll be talking about it. But yeah, closer to the ground, it hits the ground and goes up. You get a smaller dome of radiation. Yeah.
These are directional antennas, right?
Dipoles, this direction and that direction. Actually, it depends. Your load that comes off of it. He talks about that. You talk about takeoff angle? Okay. You will? Okay, question, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, so going back to the gauge of the wire, the thicker the gauge, the heavier it is, but the stronger the wire is. And there's also an expression that if you have your wire up in the tree and it breaks, that, you know, if you have a dipole up in the air and it doesn't break, it's not high enough.
Right. Okay. All right. That's too high? I use pine trees as my towers to stretch these wires between. Okay. They're about 80 foot, but I haven't gotten to the top. Some of them are 15 foot. Some of them are 40 foot. I have a 50-foot piece of coax that I hook at the bottom, run it up, and then I run a 200-foot length of RG8 back to the shack. So.
One other thing I wanted to suggest: if you worry about tension on your dipole, use a marine bungee cord at one or both of the ends.
Yep.
That'll keep the tension even regardless if the trees start swaying.
Yes.
Bungee cords will stretch, and you can get them on Amazon. I got a couple of 4 to 7 footers. So it's 4 foot, and then it stretches out to 7 feet, and that's a lot more than my trees sway.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Oh, okay. If you want to get on the air, throw it up in the air and get on the air. Any other questions? Okay. Like I said, we'll post this on the YouTube channel. You can see the websites and stuff. But there again, take your favorite search engine and search for wire antennas, whatever you want to make. And you can get your wire if you want to put up a full wave loop for 80 meters, 529 feet. Is that what somebody calculated that out? Okay. So yeah, a 500-foot spool of wire from Home Depot won't cut the extra 29 feet. You have to get two of them and make it. All right. Then you have to have the real estate to put it up.
Good evening. Finally. Okay, so we're going to go back a few steps. Dave was presenting more or less the, we'll call it the high school version of life. I'm going to go back to grade school. Okay. So a lot of things can antenna, as Mike Cade, MRD, calls it. He made a couple of videos, actually, where he tried to use ordinary objects as antennas with his Xiegu G90, which has an internal tuner, and was able to make some contacts. That does not count as an endorsement of hooking up your transceiver to a nearby chain link fence, however. A low SWR is ideal, but on the other hand, as we all know, a dummy load has a perfect SWR, okay? Okay. Doesn't mean it's efficient. Next, please. So, what does it take to antenna well? Well, ideally, we want an antenna to be resonant at the desired frequency or within the band you're interested in. Back in ancient history, audiophiles demanded high-quality sound. LP albums can get dusty, scratched, or warped, so the true aficionados listened to music using tape recorders, which meant that the quality of the tape itself was the limiting factor in the quality of the sound. Anybody remember those days? Yeah, okay. Well, especially Dallas, okay. Memorex Corporation showed their tape to provide the truest reproduction of the original recording in a memorable commercial with Ella Fitzgerald, if you remember that. Is it live or is it Memorex? Remember that one? Okay. So the most efficient antenna, the most resonant for a given frequency, is an antenna operating in free outer space, not your backyard. What we'd really like is for the wires on the dipole to be just long enough so that at the frequency of our choice, we could get exact half waves that shift with time. Next, please. So I've got an example here that I made of a 20-meter dipole. Very simple instructions. Why did I use 14-gauge wire? It's what I had on hand. It's that simple. I'll have it up here afterwards. Assemble it, find a place to hang it. That's all it takes. Next, please. So what does this antenna do? Well, in free space, it gives you a nice donut in terms of radiator energy. Okay? There's no distortion. Everything is wonderful. On the other hand, real life is almost always different. Our antennas are affected by their proximity to the dirt, the trees, any buildings, or anything else that conducts electricity or may even think about conducting electricity. That's why Yagis and some Invis antennas have driven elements and unpowered elements that reflect and direct the radiation, so you can get it going exactly the direction you want. Mr. Maxwell wrote a bunch of equations. You might remember those? No, probably not. Anyway, okay. You remember those? Yeah, okay, fair enough. Mr. Maxwell will always be right. Okay. Now to get back to dipoles. Next, please. So this was originally built with a 14 gauge wire, partly because that's what I had, and also with the idea of needing to stretch it and not have, and I didn't think up front about having a line running directly from the tree to the tripod and just taping it along the way. I wasn't that bright. So the idea is the wire itself would take the strain. So the reason I did this one was I was tracking down the source of a different problem with a different antenna. Kevin understands that one problem. And I needed to isolate all of the elements of the equation one by one. So I decided let's keep it down to absolute bottom brass tacks, which was, to me, was the dipole. Okay, now this tree was in the middle of, this antenna was set up in the middle of my yard, which wasn't a practical location to keep it there, but at least it helped me find the real problem. Next, please. So what does that look like in terms of radiation patterns? I've drawn this in relationship to the tree. You can see that actually back here on the backside at the high end of that line, we got almost a belly button. We got a dimple. Lowest area of the radiation, whereas it's pushing it forward and out to the side. It's out to the side because it's a dipole. And all right, okay. Now there's also in that yard a hill on one side, a house on the other. So that's definitely going to impact things. I did not try to model those. So Kirchhoff's law, which you all remember from your technician license, power in equals power out, right? So, of course, you can waste some along the way, but we'll setting that aside. Taking that donut and moving it down to the ground just shoves the distribution of the power around. Okay? That's what you're seeing here. Next. You can also try an inverted V, which was asked about before. You can turn this dipole into an inverted V with a simple single center support, and then a couple of tent stakes on either end. The blobs you see along the length, I drew those in because this could also be made as a linked dipole. Okay, linked dipole. Let's say this was built so that it's intended to be a 20 meter, but if I were to take a piece of anything, piece of rope, and insert it right here at the end of that length of wire, I get a 10 meter antenna, or a 12 or a 15. No, actually that was 6, 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20. So you can get all of those out of one set of inverted wires. Now, I will promise you that setting up all of those at exactly the right length, one at a time, and running the mast up and down several times for each one, because you don't want to, if you cut it too short, it's too short, right? That'll be an all-day evolution. Plan on spending all Saturday, maybe even into Saturday evening, getting that done. Or you might want to split up the job. Just get 1 or 2 bands on the first day. Or if you want to get something up in the air fast, just cut a piece for 20 meters, have some fun with that, and then work on the others. I also went out to ask the question, how much power can you put in a piece of wire? And so using a fairly standard rule of thumb, if you wanted to put out 100 watts, you could use 20 gauge wire. Now, we've talked about that being less bandwidth. I don't have numbers on that, so I'm not going to talk to it. But you can put 100 watts out on 20 gauge and not have things melt down on you. I was using stranded. That makes the linked dipoles a little little more complicated. You got to figure out how you're going to join those together. There are 2 or 3 different ways of doing that, though, very easily actually. I chose, of course, the more expensive answer because that's how I end up making a lot of decisions, especially concerning radio. Okay, comes out of the piggy bank. What can I say? Anyway, any questions? Yes, in the back.
Thank you. When we say bandwidth, what do we mean?
Okay, so if I were to put an antenna analyzer, hook that up to my coax, I would get a response curve. Let's say all we're talking about is we're talking about usable bandwidth, right? Okay. You can stuff any frequency you want in here. It's a question of efficiency, right? Ideally, we would like a low SWR, right? So I can hook up an antenna analyzer to the antenna, to my coax. And that antenna analyzer is going to sweep through a range of frequencies and give me a curve, right? So if I've got greater bandwidth, it says that I can keep the SWR down at a low level for a wider range of frequencies. So ideally I could use one antenna that would cover both the CW end of the 20-meter band and the voice portion of the 20-meter band. That would be a nice, wide, shallow arc, right? Other types of antennas, especially magnetic antennas, magnetic loop antennas, as I understand it, notice the phrasing, they have a much steeper V relationship in that instead of a nice shallow SWR curve. That's referred to the Q value of the antenna, and I've just now gone off the deep end in terms of what I know. So, yes.
What stops you from running, I don't know, car jumper wires? Just is there some kind of relation with how thick the wires are?
Well, if you want to run number 4 wire, more power to you. Okay. If you've got a 20 meter dipole is going to take 10 meters, call it 33 feet of wire. So you got 33 feet of number 4 wire. Go for it, brother. The only thing that's going to stop you is the weight and portability. I want to see you do that on POTA. I don't have. I'm not an expert on that. Kevin may be able to help you with that.
It'll be a little wider, but you're talking about the cost more than anything else.
You'll run out of money before you need to worry about it. Trust me.
Just wanted to ask a question in regards to a dipole sloper.
Yes.
And when you factor in a counterpoise.
Oh, okay. Dipole doesn't need a counterpoise.
So explain to me that sloper with a counterpoise.
No. Let's
okay, help me out with that.
Would you go back to that slide, to the layout? Oh no, that's the coax coming down. Yeah. That's just upper and lower support points. Keep it off the ground. I'm sorry, there's still a question in your mind, I can tell.
Thinking about an end-fed?
Yeah, I guess that's what it's an end-fed with the balun at the bottom, closer to the ground, but not on the ground.
Let's not use the phrase end-fed. That's a totally different kind of antenna.
Okay, so not in
fed. This is a center fed, if you think about it, right?
Right.
Okay. And Kevin referred to an off-center fed antenna. So imagine this antenna, which is split 50-50.
Right.
Perhaps I move the feed point down to the 40% or maybe 33% total length.
Okay.
That's an off-center fed antenna. Gives you more bands, but you're going to need a tuner.
or balance?
So I'm asking the question because I have what the bullet they call it.
Yes, the Palomar
Yes,
engineers. Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
And I laid the counterpoise on the ground, and I had the sloper in the tree. So
Okay, you've got a totally different type of antenna. Okay. No. He's not talking about that.
no, sir.
No,
You're familiar with the antenna I'm talking
I
about.
am. Let's talk later.
Okay.
Uh-oh. You're gonna get me, Joseph? All right. Well, I'm pretty simple tonight, so that
I'm a very
works.
simple guy. Going back to that prior slide that you just had up there, on your tripod, is there a certain like a minimum height that's recommended for the tripod part that you have on your diagram?
The radiation patterns that I showed the results for this being at 2 meters and 7 meters. So yay high for the lowest point.
So you're saying 7 feet?
I'm saying, yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
It'll work. Is it as good as if the whole thing were raised up 20 feet? No, but so the antenna, the radiation patterns that you saw, with these as close to the ground as they are not primarily DX antennas. They are closer to what's described as near vertical incident skywave, NVIS. So they are regional use antennas, say 300, 500 mile. My chief interest in radio is emergency communications. And so if I can get 300 miles away from ground zero, I'm good. I don't need to reach around the world with that. Okay?
This is a Swiss Army knife. It has a computer built in, Raspberry Pi 4. It puts out, this one will put out 40 watts. You limit it back to 25, 30 watts. $500. It's made in India by Asher Farhan. His software is not the best, so we use somebody called JJ Software, and JJ has created software that does everything. So if you need logging, this logs. If you want to do FT8, this does FT8. If you want to interpret Morse code, this interprets Morse code. If you want to send standard messages with Morse code, this does it. So absolutely anything that you want. They also added DSP on this. So almost anything you can get on a $1,500 radio is built in here. The only thing it doesn't have is a tuner. My antennas are typically verticals because I've got a small backyard, and the verticals are all basically tuned, so I don't need a tuner. Also, when I go do POTA, I use a vertical, and I can set that vertical for the frequency I'm using. Typically, I use 14 megahertz, 20 meters. So that's kind of it. I thought I had the output. Yeah, thank you. HDMI. No notes makes it tough. But anyway, it's a heck of a deal. hfsignal.com is where you can find these. Take a look. He's also got something called, this is an S-bit X. He also has one called a Z-bit X, which puts out 5 watts. It's using a Raspberry Pi, but the smallest one. And unfortunately, it's not quick enough for Morse code with the code interpretation. But it works fine for voice. FT8 does all that. So interesting device and cheap. What did he say?
HF Signals.
Should be rfsignal.com. Yeah, Lynn. Typically every few months. So he's come a long way from the first. The other thing this has is that it has its own logging program. He's got a program in here that takes your log, puts it in the correct format, sends it to your computer so you can upload it. He does the updates for the transceiver automatically. You push a button and it updates the whole system. So everything is built in. I'm telling you, for a cheap price, it's unbelievable. Yes, sir. Signals with an S. Thank you, sir. Okay, any other questions? Well, you can see me after.
All right, this is in response to a few other people. And by the way, if y'all are going to have conversations, if you keep it real quiet, because if I can hear you up front, that means the people next to you probably can't hear what's going on. I'd appreciate that. So this is a result. Will asked me last week, gave me a list of things, some ideas for newcomers, questions about what bands are operating at what time of day and stuff like that. We got field day coming up in June, and this is a good opportunity for you to understand, well, why is the 80-meter station only operating at night? And why is the 10-meter station only operating during the day? I'm going to explain some of that here. So, and you can find all of this stuff on the internet. It is so easy to find. So you can take a look at that. But basically, the contributors to any HF propagation, the sun is the main thing. So we have a solar maximum and a solar minimum. It's an 11-year cycle. Right now, we're at pretty much the peak of the solar maximum, which is great for our HF stuff. You have 10 meters open till late at night a lot of times. You have a lot more activity on 6 meters. On the lower band, sometimes you have a little bit more geothermal noise that shows up, solar noise. But for the most part, the bands are a lot active. During the solar minimum, you'll find 10 meters will be closed. What I mean by closed is you can only hear local people. There's no skip. It just whoop, goes through the atmosphere or through the ionosphere, goes out in space, and you don't hear anybody. So that's when the bands are dead. There's just no activity. So now you can talk to Australia on several. In fact, I have a friend of mine on 6 meters. He talks to Japan, FT8, but still talks to Japan, which is really cool. Meteor scatter, if you ever listen to certain, like FM broadcast band, for instance, and you're listening to a distant station and you're anywhere near an airport where an airplane flies overhead, you'll hear reflections from that plane. All of a sudden, boom, 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 you'll hear a signal bounce up and down. That's similar to what meteor scatter is, because what meteors, when they come into the Earth, break apart, you'll end up ionizing the atmosphere and you'll get short bursts. And that's what I think JT65, I think, is what that mode is for meteor scatter. Anyway, it's a very quick, very short period of time, but you can send a lot of information, high speed data, and be able to pick it up through meteor scatter, much more so. I know years ago, before I was born probably, they would end up communicating over long distance. It's called tropospheric scatter, and they would send high energy. I know, Steve, you probably dealt with some of that. Yeah, I figured, right, but you probably actually designed and worked on systems that did that. So that's how you had this over-the-horizon type system. They would blast the tar out of the ionosphere, and some of this would come back down to the ground. You may put 100,000 watts out, but you get 10 watts down, but it's still down, and you can actually set communications beyond where normally you'd be able to get it. So those are some kind of things that do that. For VHF, yes, sir, get a microphone. Over the horizon woodpecker radar, I'm sure they do. Some of it's dead. In fact, a friend of mine visited one in Ukraine that's now just all rusty and everything else, but that was one of their over horizon radars. And it's still there, but it's not operational, I understand. Oh, it's back on the air? Okay. Okay. So if you hear this, and stuff like that, you know what that is. It's the over the horizon radar. So what I wanted to get VHF and UHF, the key thing with propagation on that one, you have what is called tropospheric ducting. if you get a high pressure system, you get these different layers of air that will actually act like a microwave waveguide, and it'll send signals a lot further. I remember when I was in Florida and I was on UHF, and I was picking up stations 150 miles away, repeaters. It was like, wow, well, that was ducting. And a lot of that occurs down there because of all the ocean currents and everything else, a lot of moisture. Tropospheric ducting also is really cool when you get a cold front. There was one that I lived in northern Florida, and I ended up picking up FM broadcast stations all the way up the coast of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, into Virginia. I called a radio station in Norfolk, Virginia. I was picking them up, won an album from one of them. So that was kind of cool. My chemistry professor would look at me, Mr. Scott, you were doing DXing again last night. Yes, sir, I was. So that was great. So daytime HF bands, basically, 160 meters, 80 meters, 75 meters, those bands pretty much nighttime bands. But when you start getting 5 megahertz, maybe a little bit, but certainly 40 meters is a good daytime band for medium distances. Nighttime rolls around and becomes a great nighttime band. And I'll explain all that, why some things are daytime bands and nighttime bands in a little bit. And you'll see some graphics on that. 20 meters and up, all those are daytime bands. During sunspot maximus, you'll find that 20 meters can be open till midnight, sometimes 24 hours. I've been on 10 meters during sunspot maximum. It's open way late at night, even sometimes, luckily, past midnight, stuff like that, be able to talk all over the place. During sunspot minimum, no good. So those are some of the daytime bands, HF bands. During a sunspot minimum, as I mentioned there, a lot of them are dead. And when you get above like 15 meters, a lot of times, you can usually hear FT8. You usually don't hear much sideband. Sometimes you hear some CW. But the FT8 being that it's the most popular frequency, I usually tune to that to see if the band is open. That's kind of my one thing. Whisper is another thing you can look at as well, which is a great propagation mode detector to see if you're actually, open to certain areas. And right now it's really good for that. But during the solar minimum, that would be a real good propagation detector. 10 meters a lot of times is often flat out dead, 6 meters as well. But occasionally you get sporadic E, and that can happen. The E layer, which I'll explain a little bit in a bit, but the E layer is a medium height layer, and you'll get propagation on that'll reflect on 10 meters, 6 meters, occasionally 2 meters. FM broadcast band, television, back when Channel 2 used to be an analog, man, you'd pick up some Channel 2 from all over the place. It was really amazing. Then you knew 6 meters was open. So the nighttime bands, now I didn't cover any of the sub-bands like the 2200 meter or 630 meter bands. Those are primarily, they're nighttime bands, but you also get good ground wave coverage during the daytime. Just like on the AM broadcast band, you'll find a station down at 540 will propagate a whole lot longer because it's ground wave. It follows the curvature of the earth even during the daytime versus a station that's at 1700 doesn't get out very far. Its ground wave coverage is a lot less. So, but for skywave that you're looking for here, that's what I'm kind of doing that. Skywave really on the lower frequency bands at nighttime because the sun is now behind the earth and it's not ionizing the atmosphere as much. It's not as much affected by the sunspots. You will get some noise, and you'll get, whenever there's a coronal mass ejection and things like that, of course you'll get radio blackouts, and Tom just informed me more of the physics of that. Those coronal mass ejections and flares and stuff like that, they just eat away at the upper layers of the ionosphere, and therefore instead of the signals bouncing back down and refracting back down, they just go out to space. They become too thin. I'd really be interested if they ever set up an HF propagation model on Mars. I want to see if that thin atmosphere might get some propagation, but that's another story. Well, I'll have to ask the Martian to see if the next time they do the Martian 2, they do something like that. So the different layers, I found this on the internet. This is a really, really good. Whoops, not that way. We'll go around here. So the AM broadcast band there in the daytime, you don't pick up anything much further away than ground wave coverage. That's because this D layer here absorbs all that lower frequency energy. Same thing for 160 meters, 75, 80 meters. E layer, that's the one that we get that E skip on 6 meters and stuff. You'll get some little patches that will ionize Why? Sometimes it's because of the solar maximum. Particles from coming from the sun will ionize it, aurora, things like that. And sometimes it's just like they're there for an hour or two and then they're gone. That's why they're called sporadic. It's not always there. But those will mainly reflect those upper frequencies. Then you have in the daytime, you have the F1 and F2 layer. And then at nighttime, they kind of thin out and they kind of combine. They drop down kind of in between. I mentioned here F1 and F2 combine at night. But this is the main layer during this solar maximum, the sunspot maximum, where 10 meters and 15 meters, 12 meters, all those different bands, they reflect off there and you get the real good long distance communication as a result of that. Yes, sir.
D-layer disappear at night?
Yes, the D layer disappears at night, so it doesn't absorb the lower frequency energy. That's why 80 meters, 160 meters become wonderful at night, because that goes away and it no longer dissipates. So then because they'll end up bouncing off this F layer and get your multi-hops. Whoops. So we're talking about takeoff angle. Now the antenna height that you are above the ground will affect the actual antenna height or the takeoff angle. Somebody mentioned about NVIS or near zero, yeah. So that's near zero vertical incident skyway. Thank you. I have to get that down. So with that, there's your NVIS where you have a signal that because you're so low to the ground, a lot of that signal just reflects basically straight up. So obviously you're not going to skip very far, but it's great for local communications, 60, 100, 150, maybe 200 miles. And you can get out there and it's really great for that communication. Emergency communication, you'll find they do that a lot for like FEMA, hurricane, recovery relief, all those kind of disasters or whatever. You want to be able to get out in that small zone that normally you can't get, that sometimes you'll skip over for certain higher antennas, but you want to be able to get that local communication because that's where the blackout is, because all your power's out, cell towers are out and everything else. So you want to communicate in that area. But you realize, you take a look here, the lower your takeoff angle is, the further your signal is going to go. So the higher your antenna is above the ground, the lower your takeoff angle is. So if you get it up a quarter wavelength, half wavelength, a full wavelength, that's harder on 160 and 80 meters, especially 160. You really have to get it up there. But 20 meters is not that difficult to get up there, 10 meters especially. So you get up there and you'll end up getting a nice signal the fewer the hops you have to deal with, the stronger your signal is going to be, because every time it goes up here, you lose some signal through the ionosphere. So if you're going to talk to somebody way over here, you want to be able to have as low and as much chance to get a hop over there. There are other things, though. If you're trying to communicate with somebody, say, here, you can skip over them. And if you're trying to communicate, maybe what you need to do is also lower your antenna. The only problem is this layer varies. So if you hear fading and stuff, that's because this is moving up and down, and your signal, your skip, is doing one of these numbers. It's going back and forth. And that's one of the main reasons for fading when you're talking to somebody at a particular distance. Yes, sir. It really depends on the time of day because of where this F layer is. It is a function of the antenna and the antenna height as well, and vertical antennas as well. If you want to take a look at some of those, you have quarter wave, half wave, 5/8 wave, and they'll have, and I don't have any diagrams with that, but if you really want to have something of a lower takeoff angle, you go like the 5/8 wavelength antenna, and sometimes you have multiple lobes. But as far as the height is really going to be for a dipole, if you want to take the basic dipole, the height above ground, what are you asking for? Oh, for a vertical antenna? Okay, for a ground mounted vertical versus a ground plane, and I have that here. Great, I'm caught. There we go. Got it. Oh yeah, fishing. So here we have a ground plane antenna, and this is your basic quarter wave antenna. You can scale this. This is one for 2 meters, but you can scale this, and I've used it for 10 meters and 15 meters and talked all over the world as a novice. 75 watts, talked Indonesia. But the beauty about it, it's a 50 ohm antenna if you have these radials at a quarter wavelength, or a little longer, 5% longer than a quarter wavelength. You got your quarter wavelength up here, and it's easy to tune by length and also by the angle. Yes, sir. Depends on where you are. All right, so this is a ground plane, and it's, like I said, it's you can scale it up for any frequency you want. Heck, if you want to make a 160 meter ground plane, God bless you. Maybe a helium balloon or something like that. That's going to be one heck of an antenna. But you can also, ground mounted, what it's called a monopole, is where you have this going to a radial system in the ground. Now that's going to be essentially 35 ohms or sometimes even lower, depending on your ground conductivity. But if you want to elevate this above ground, there's your 50 ohm antenna right there. And it does a pretty good job. Now the takeoff angle of this is kind of like your donut. It's probably going to be about 30 to 45 degree takeoff angle. You go to a half wavelength antenna, and of course there's a different matching section down there to make it 50 ohms as well. And you end up bringing that down quite a bit more. I don't have those diagrams up here, but for 5/8, you'll actually have 2 different lobes that'll bring it down low, and plus you'll have one a little bit higher. But it does, you'll find some AM broadcast stations, in order to get a better ground wave coverage, they'll actually go to a half wave instead of a quarter wave monopole antenna. And there's some slopers. There was one station that I was chief engineer at that actually had it was a grounded tower, and it had a sloper wire that tapped up to the 50 ohm point of the tower itself, but it was lightning protected. The whole thing was on ground. So that was a unique antenna. I had a matching box for that. Does that kind of answer your question about? Okay. So the type of antenna you have from a vertical perspective will affect that. And if you have too long of an antenna, like I have also 2 inverted L's in my yard, and those are 165 feet and 175 feet long, and they work from 160 meters on up. They do require a ground system, so I have ground radials all on the ground for that one. But it's a multi-band antenna, works great. Takeoff angle, if the more vertical your main section is, the more it acts like, even a quarter wavelength or a little bit half wavelength. It's actually a 3/8 wavelength long antenna. So it's electrically long, but you shorten it through a capacitor, although I use an antenna tuner on that particular one. Don't know what the takeoff angle of that one exactly is, but it seems to be pretty good, because during there's a 160 meter contest, which I missed a few weeks ago, and I've been able to work Hawaii on that one. And I keep, as the nighttime rolls west, I'm hitting South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, Seattle, Washington area with that antenna on 160 meters. So obviously it's doing pretty well. All right, so what you're going to have pretty much at VHF, UHF is line of sight. Now you do get, the lower you are in VHF frequencies, like 6 meters, you get a little bit of bending around. 2 meters, a little bit less bending, but you get some. UHF, not much bending at all. So as you go higher and higher in frequency, a lot more attenuation, less bending around the curvature of the Earth. So mountains and hills and stuff become major obstructions there.
Kev, if the D layer is caused by the sun in the daytime, what causes the ionosphere or the F layer to form at night? Is it cosmic radiation or
it's leftovers from the daytime? It's just it thins out. So it's still there. There's ionosphere.
So it's a fade out during the night. As the night gets longer, that fades out.
It will. And that's why at 10 meters, like during the solar minimum, if you happen to be lucky where the F layer is thick enough to actually bend your waves and refract them back down to the ground, by the time nighttime rolls around, it gets so thin it just doesn't reflect it anymore. But there's still enough reflection on the lower frequencies, AM broadcast band, 160 meters, 80. There's still enough there. It doesn't completely go away. Now, the sun, fortunately, is pretty big, and it still sends out particles, and it keeps some of that upper layer still done. If the sun ever shut off, yeah, there would be nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be the least of my problems. So, and just to show you here, I think that this representative is basically, it's showing that 21 megahertz is getting out a little further than 7, probably because if for the same antenna, for that same particular height, from a wavelength perspective, that antenna is higher wavelength-wise on 21 megahertz than it is for 40 meters or 7 megahertz. And therefore, you get a lower takeoff angle and it gets out a little bit further. But it shows you as well, if your takeoff angle is too high, you're going to not refract enough. And really, we call it reflection, but it's really refraction. And if you get not enough refraction to come back down, well, we call that a reflection. But any way you look at it, the ionosphere is refracting your radio signal. If it doesn't refract enough, it just goes out in outer space. And then you're talking to somebody out on Pluto. This one I think was pretty cool. This one shows all the lower different frequencies. And for you mariners out there, for submarines, this is how you communicate it on these really low frequencies, really long wavelengths. But that's predominantly nothing but ground wave. And those signals actually follow the curvature of the Earth. Skywave is what we're concerned about with medium wave and HF. Troposcatter, not as much unless you're really into that specialized technique. And then, of course, anybody who works any of the satellites, that's all line of sight. Or repeaters, or mountain topping, that's all line of sight. As you go higher in frequency, you're not going to get any of this stuff. I mean, microwaves are going to go through the atmosphere, period. So I thought this was kind of cool. And one final thing with regard to antennas. Now, Alan, you showed one plot with regard to your sloper. This is another one that I found as well, which shows you for different antenna heights. For a regular dipole, quarter wavelength above the ground versus a half wavelength above the ground, you can see your main radiation is going up, but here you're just getting more radiation going here. And then as you get further up, you get a sharper piece, lower radiation angle, but you get a mixture here. And then you start getting some other mixtures. So depending on how high your antenna is, you start getting mixtures of radiation patterns of where they go. This is kind of cool because you could have both a long range and a medium range takeoff angle that will allow you to be able to talk probably in multiple different areas. And if you want to take a look from above, what your azimuth pattern actually is for that particular dipole. And with that, any questions?